Welcome to the Roost Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Pitcher. Today we have on Casey Thomas. He's the Director of Nutrition for One Health Providence, which is amongst a esports organization. I got to know about who Casey is from a couple different people who were on the podcast previously, Christina Chu and Ross Shumway. So if you haven't listened to their podcast episodes, definitely go back and give those a listen. But really fortunate to have Casey on, especially because he works with a very unique population that I'm sure he'll tell us, but I don't feel many dietitians work with right now. But Casey, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I love that you had Ross and Christina on here. Awesome people, great, smart, intelligent, good quality people in the field, which we need more of. So I'm like really excited that you're bringing those kind of people on. It makes me feel like I'm in good company. Hopefully I'm not bringing it down.
Absolutely. Could you give the audience, what is your roots? Who is Casey?
Yeah. So I'm Casey. I largely consider myself a performance dietitian, which I tell other people, like when friends and family ask, is simply like I tell people what to eat in order to be better at whatever it is. And my claim to fame, I guess you could say, is that I try to leverage various nutrition and supplemental strategies to enhance cognitive performance rather than strictly physical. This kind of goes all the way back. My undergraduate degree was in neurobiology, and I actually spent considerable time working in clinical research in the private sector before I even became a dietitian. So I was working in clinical research, and we were working on various supplements and pharmaceuticals and their impacts on the brain in both clinical and healthy individuals. And so, I just loved all the nutrition things, though, too, that I could do on top of, the pharmaceutical and supplemental aids. And from there, I did go back to school to become a registered dietitian, been working with a lot of athletes. But one of the things that kind of set me apart was that I was able to leverage these nutrition strategies for cognitive performance. And what you'll see is that a lot of sports are on a spectrum between purely cognitive and purely physiological. And I would argue that a lot of sports, more often than not, the difference between first and last place is something that's actually neurological rather than physiological. You tend to see that you look at a lot of like track events, and literally like a fraction of a second determines the difference between first and last place. You look at a lot of swimming events, you look at a lot of these different types of events, and that could just come down to just simple reaction time, right? Like if you heard the sound of the gun a little bit quicker than that guy right over there, then you could just be first place. But there's all sorts of things. Even in team sports, you have like decision making, you have team captains, you have strategizing, you got hand-eye coordination, shooting accuracy. You got all these things that are dictated by your nervous system. And so for me, I've been able to pull a lot of that and use that to enhance. And esports was a little bit of a return to come to home for me. I'm a gamer my whole life, albeit a very bad one. And they were like, hey, you're doing all this stuff with these like professional athletes. I see you working with like, basketball players. I see you working with, baseball players. Can you help us over here? And I was like, you know what, I actually can. And you're a very underserviced population. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I kind of got there. I don't know if you want to go into any more details with any of that or not.
Yeah, I guess what is esports for many people who don't even know essentially what that is? I mean, obviously, if anyone's played a game system before, like I see your cool little sign in the back, eat, sleep, game, and repeat. I used to play Call of Duty, a little bit of Madden growing up. Some people might have played Halo or whatever that may be. But what is esports?
Yeah. So esports is really interesting to me. Technically speaking, I mean, the short of it is it's video games. Like at the end of the day, that's what it is. So it's competitive video gaming. And now, if you talk to like my parents' age, they would all laugh at that, and they would say, what are you talking about? This is a joke. Like that's not a real thing. But in the last, I'd say 10, 15 years or so, it's really sort of evolved into a true competitive space. And you will see crazy things happening. Like you will see that, to me, like this blew my mind coming from traditional sports. You would see that, for example, just one of these video game titles, just one of them, like the world championship viewership for that exceeded the viewerships for all of the traditional sport, like World Series, Super Bowl, like Stanley Cup, like all that stuff combined. You put all those views together in the traditional sports arena, and this one title like blew them out of the water for viewership. You'll see that they'll sell at Madison Square Garden to watch this like in seconds. Like they'll book entire football stadiums worth of people and seats for these events just to come watch these people play. And so it's this huge booming industry. And I think that it was accelerated somewhat in COVID, when, sports was kind of in a scary position for a little bit. And we saw that esports really started to take off. And you're seeing some college campuses are offering scholarships now for esports programs and things like this. Like, you can be a high school kid, be really good at video games, and get a scholarship because of it. Like
that's wild.
like that's kind of wild to me, right? Like, you don't see, like, thinking of like when I grew up, like that would just be absolutely bonkers. But it's such a new industry, and truth be told, not to speak ill of the demographic, but because the field is so new, they're the people who are in charge and making the systems. They don't have the same knowledge, or they don't realize that a lot of what they're trying to do has already been discovered in parallel fields. So if you look in like the tactical setting, if you look in the sports setting, if you look in a lot of these industries, you'll see that they have a lot of these systems and practices already figured out, and they have methods for business, like how to monetize, how to get brand sponsorships, how to do this and that. And a lot of the times the people in esports are still figuring it out, and they haven't branched out to see, what's over there. And one thing that's severely lacking in esports is traditional support staff that you might see in traditional sports. And so there's usually like one catch-all guy. It's kind of like old school times when it was just like the strength coach who was like, the dietitian, the psychiatrist, the doctor,
all hats.
Yeah. And so you normally have that now. And it's like, and that also sometimes doubles as the coach, or sometimes doubles as like the team manager. And we see that now in esports. But the funny thing is, like, they have these teams, they're hiring coaches, they're getting like multi-million-dollar contracts. Like it's no joke. It's like, can you imagine if you're like a 14-year-old and you're like, hey, I want to sign you for $2 million this year. Can you do it? What 14-year-old is going to say no?
I mean, that's even beyond NIL. If you look at it, like, I mean, these kids are starting to make that type of money, later high school, like going into college. And like now you're saying that. So now, kid, if you're really good and you put all your focus in that game, you can make $2 million. Like, if you don't have the right people in place to even know what to do with that sum of money, who knows what could happen? Like, your brain, I'm sure you could tell me, like, your brain's not fully developed to be able to handle those types of situations at that young of an age.
Yeah, a lot of them really squander it, I would say, and because they're lacking the guidance, that sometimes they get ported over to a different country or something. So there's a lot of international issues that go on there, and I could talk a lot about the behind the scenes with esports. But the thing that really gets to me that I want to bring up is just we are seeing in this industry that there are numerous individuals, very high profile individuals that everybody in the scene would recognize, who are retiring in like their early 20s because of things like repetitive strain injuries, because uncontrolled diabetes, all sorts of these like clinical issues that could have realistically been prevented if you had the appropriate support staff, and of which nutrition is a component. I'm not going to say it's the only component, but it is a component that could have played a factor in their longevity in the field. And so for me, I see this, and I play video games. So yeah, getting back to it, sorry, esports is video gaming, competitive video gaming, set up in almost the exact same way that traditional sports is. You got viewerships, you got fans, you got brand sponsorships, you got contracts, you got teams, you got free agents, you got like all this kind of stuff. Like everything that you can think of is just the same exact thing in traditional sports over in esports, but they're not doing it as good.
So where have you seen, as you come on to scene of this, where did esports originate? Is it just, it was already all over the country? Is it like a certain part of the country? Is it overseas and it came to the US? Like, obviously I know we all play video games, but where's kind of the origin?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think some of the first games that had mass appeal for people to actually come and watch, I think there were two. I think one, we owe some credit to Korea, who really loved StarCraft. I think StarCraft was one of the first.
I played StarCraft.
I want to say we owe a lot to StarCraft, and then I think we also owe a lot to old school arcade fight games, like Street Fighter, those kind of things, because you would see people, go to these events to watch and see who could be the best player at these things, and then the crowds kind of went crazy, and then things, streaming services like Twitch happened, right? And then people started watching it, and it'd be crazy when Twitch first opened and it was just video games. You would see like some of these kids who are just playing the video game. You'd have like over 100,000 views on any given night. He's just playing video games and watching. People are watching him, and it's crazy. And then it kind of grew from there, and people were like, "Oh, maybe people want to watch this. More people want to watch this." So yeah, it's I think it's been steadily growing, and it's really interesting because they've tried to break into like the TV space. I don't know. Again, this is like politics and like stuff from I don't know if we want to even go in that direction, but like they've had an issue breaking into TV because they tried to like showcase it like in the middle of like a football game, and then people who traditionally are
That's
watching
not
football
gonna
are
work.
like, yeah, what'd you put on my TV? Like, why'd you
Why
put
am I
this like
watching Call of Duty while at halftime for 10 minutes and then they're gonna go back into the game?
yeah, so that like quickly fell through, but most people, I don't know, I mean what your stance is on streaming services anyway, but it seems like we're moving over that ways. So
Yeah, cable's becoming honestly obsolete, and then
yeah,
it'll just be all these streaming services, and we have what 5, 6, 7, 8 streaming services, and then probably after that point, once they get to that many, then you're just going
yeah,
to see everyone buy each other out, and then we will be right back where we were before, and there's going to be 2 or 3 streaming services, and you're paying $150 a month for this streaming service. So it's just going to come full circle. I
I
mean, if you
know.
look at like NFL ticket and that stuff, like $200-300 a month. I'm just like, why do I gotta pay $200-300 a month to watch a football game? Like
It's
that's
crazy. Yeah, yeah, the
but
prices are absolutely bonkers, honestly.
I think the
um
crazy thing you mentioned though was these guys as athletes retiring at 20 to 21 years old. So if they're going to college and getting a scholarship for this, can they even make it through the 4 years of college and on top of doing the gaming at the same time? Is that even realistic?
yeah,
Unless they have a support staff around them?
so I would say that a lot of times the people who enter at the collegiate level are doing it more as a hobby rather than professionally. um And it kind of reminds me a little bit of, I mean, there's this joke in esports, like if you're like 25, like you're an old man, like you got old man arthritic fingers, like like they say you're slow, like you're literally ancient. Um, but and so because of that, we see that this demographic is slanted very young. And it reminds me a little bit because I've worked with like gold medaling like gymnastic Olympians, and for them again the demographic is slanted very young, right? Like you see these individuals competing when they're 14, 15, 16 years old, and by the time they hit their 20s their bodies are so riddled with injuries that they are ancient. So you don't see too many older 20 some odd year olds competing in professional gymnastics. And the funny thing about them too is because I used to work with the UCLA gymnastics teams. um, uh, our team was so stacked because most girls, so ours was, we only had a women's gymnastics program at UCLA. We did not have a men. Most programs, because of this slant, are these kids who just, you do it as a hobby because they're past their prime already. So they're doing it for fun. They do it for enjoyment. But our team was stacked. We had like, I don't know, we had like 50 gold medals on our team or something. And so then like, you'd have our
How do you
school go
beat
against,
that?
yeah, you'd have our school go against like another school, and the other school's like, I'm just here for fun. And then like out comes Miss, triple gold medal. And then you're like, well, you just get absolutely destroyed. Um, but it's somewhat similar with esports in that I find that the people who are in the collegiate level, they already have an established major. They are doing it. The idea of an esports scholarship is somewhat new, and most of the time, how most teams do their scouting is they're just looking at the ranked ladder and seeing who's good. And so most of those people are usually high school age, I would say. So you don't see too many people who go collegiate first and then transition into pro.
Gotcha. It's
Yeah,
almost if you relate to some sports, it's like some of these high schoolers that can go like straight to pro. It's like almost
yeah.
the total opposite. Like, well, I'm already a pro, and then I'm going to college and decide to play. Or I'm already a pro. I'm going to retire. I'll play a little bit casually for you for your school because I'm still really good and I can contribute and help you out.
Yeah.
But like, I'm kind of like on the downstream of this.
Yeah. I mean, I can't blame them too much. And if they did their money right, I think that they could do that kind of approach. But I do unfortunately see a lot of players who, they can't, re-sign with a team or something, so they decide to go back to school, and then that's kind of it. And then they can admittedly boost numbers for their own esports club, which is usually run out of rec right now. There was actually some major, sorry if I'm like going off the wall
Oh,
here,
you're
but
good.
there was actually some lawsuits recently, which is kind of interesting, that relates to esports and also like traditional sports. I can't remember which college campus it was, and I think it got resolved, but the issue was, you're obviously familiar with Title IX, right? And the idea of like Title IX sports and all this and that. And the short is like, you have to have a balanced number of male and female athletes, which is why UCLA, we had only female gymnastics. We also had another sport, which was our Title IX sport, in order to balance out the football team, because you need an equal amount of participants. Now, in recent times, in the last like 5-ish years or so, what we've seen actually is that the amount of people who make it into college is being slanted more on the female side. So there are more, it's like 55-60% females and only like 40-45% males, which is the inverse of what it used to be historically. And so there are some schools now that are running into this Title IX issue, but for the reverse of its initial intent, where they have too many female athletes, but not enough male athletes. And so there were some schools that were trying to propose, can we use esports as a male version of a Title IX sports to balance out the amount of female athletes that we have? And I believe the rulings, I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure the ruling recently settled like a month ago or so and said, no, it doesn't count. You can't use this as a real sport, which is kind of interesting, because we call it an esports.
You think about like Olympics too, and a lot of these sports that get switched out or put into the Olympics, like there's so many arguments, like speed walking.
Yeah,
That's an Olympic sport. So it's like you could argue on each side of the coin to say like, okay, well, you're not counting esports as a sport, but you're counting these sports as sports. But then you're taking out this sport in the Olympics that was like originated back from like Athens.
Yeah.
So it's like, does any of that make logical sense? Yes and no, but you guys got to like have a kind of defined understanding and system to know what you're counting as a sport and not a sport, because you're definitely bending the rules.
They flip-flopped a lot on some of this, and that's what upsets me, because like if they had a consistent ruling for it, then there wouldn't be these lawsuits and so on. Right. And I really do. I mean, at the end of the day, if people want to watch it in the same venue in which something else is happening, like I'm all for it. I mean, I think that's going to be it. But for esports specifically, what that means is, as this kind of spreads and trickles, is that it's largely going to be relegated, at least in the collegiate level, to the rec department rather than as part of the true athletics department, at least as far as what I've seen.
So how many dietitians are involved in esports that you're even aware or know of? Or if somebody has an interest as a dietitian, and let's say they're a gamer like yourself, and they're like, man, I definitely think I could be involved in this group or population, how does one even start? or who do they even contact, or how do they even get involved in that sense?
Yeah. So when I first got into esports, I will say, because they didn't have that designated support staff, like they don't know what they don't know, right? And so they don't know about the help and the tremendous benefit that support staff can bring to the athletes. And so the idea of a dietitian in esports is a little bit foreign to the players, the coaches, and all of the existing staff. And again, remember that a lot of these individuals are also very young, right? So even more so, the younger you are, the less you tend to care about nutrition. I'm sure you've seen that, right? So a lot of that, creative. Yeah, so a lot of them, they think they're hot stuff and they can go out and eat whatever they want and perform at their peak. And it's usually the vets that I can target who can give me some support. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is there wasn't a lot of support walking into esports. And so I did probably like 5 years of basically pro bono work, where I was just, I was working at UCLA and I was already working there. But what I did was I wanted to go help out the local UCLA rec esports club. So I would, go do presentations. I'd go talk to their players and just try to help them out. And UCI is my alma mater. That's where I did my undergrad. They have probably the biggest esports program in the nation, collegiately, at the collegiate level. And, I love all the people there. I had great conversations with, the staff and faculty and so on. And I knew they had an esports program. So I've also done a lot of, free help there. So when I was getting started in this, it was just me. I mean, I did a search, and the only person I could find who was somewhat involved in it was myself. And then when I finally became a dietitian and I was, still trying to be involved in the space, I did another search and I came across one other person, but she's in Australia, so I couldn't get any help in NA. And you
had to basically carve this space out of nothing. Yeah, you had to get in there and start chiseling.
Yeah, it's been tough, let me tell you. And most recently, actually, so I didn't actually answer your question before about what One Health Point is, but just to say it now, One Health Point is we're a team of medical providers from multiple disciplines, and we basically come as like the complete package of support staff people. So it's got a lot of physical therapists. We have a sleep guy, we got a psych guy, we got a nutrition person, we got myself. So we kind of cover all the traditional support staff disciplines that you could want, and then we go to organizations, and actually now we're contracted with pretty much every single top tier esports organization in the nation, and that's pretty awesome. And we've actually expanded globally now, so we're working internationally as well. But so recently I was able to, because we've been working with so many people, I was able to hire another dietitian to work for me. So now I can say there's 2 in NA at least. And I've actually interviewed a couple other, because we're expecting some more people. We're expecting an influx of business with this new offering that we have. And so I've actually got a couple people in waiting here, but the short is there's not enough dietitians. I need help seriously. So if anybody is interested in joining this field, like, please hit me up, because I would love to get you involved as much as I can. Like, we need all the help we can get, because these kids don't know what they're doing. So
yeah, I mean, working with this middle school, high school population, the last 4 to 5 years of my career, you definitely have to have a different mindset when you're approaching education and bringing it to the table to them, because, and especially being in this media realm and constantly on your phones, and it's got to be short. It's almost like, I talked about this actually in the last podcast, is that you got to like microdose information,
yeah,
sprinkle it in there, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Like, they can't sit down for 30, 40, 45 minutes to an hour in a group presentation or these
yeah,
one-on-ones. Like, you got to find some different avenues that's going to connect with them, that's going to like lock them in, to connect with them and hopefully get them to change 1 or 2 behaviors. And you can't expect to change the world. It's not going to happen overnight. Like, you're going to have to definitely give it time. And like you said, like, you utilize some of those older gamers in that sense. And if you
yeah.
can hopefully get them on board, and they have a lot of clout, for example, or have had a very high ranking in the past, you're able to then spread some wisdom down below to those younger individuals that are looking up to them.
Yeah. And that's something that I've really struggled with, is this microdosing content, because having come from a research background, like, I'm used to just like grinding out, like, oh, all right, it's a 3-hour lecture today. Okay. Gonna go do that. Gonna go crush, gonna go read for like, I kind of came from that. And then when I entered collegiate, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do like a 1-hour talk on supplements. And the coach was like, bro, hang on, Casey. You can't like just put all the athletes out for
Let
1
me tell
hour.
you about what really is going to happen.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, let me just book an hour, and then I was like, okay, wait. And then they're like, all right, let's try 30 minutes. And then you try 30 minutes, and I'm like seeing eyes glaze over within like, 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, so that idea of microdosing is something that like really hit hard for me. They need that quick content. They do that TikTok, that Instagram, those infographics. Like, it's got to be like one point only that you really try to get at them each time. But the fun thing that I'll say about this particular population is that, and this is no knock on traditional athletes. I've worked with some very intelligent, traditional athletes. But I will say that, somewhat to their detriment, esports players know how to use, Dr. Google, somewhat. And so they, they'll Google, their question, and they know how to like find all this stuff. And they might be like little apps, PubMed abstract warriors or something over there. And they'll pull up like a little, well, this article, so, this kind of thing. And like, they wouldn't even have
They're
read the
trying
whole
to
article.
challenge you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, and I like that, because I like those kind of conversations. But at the same time, it makes them a little bit dangerous. Like, they know just enough to be savvy. But also, at the same time, like, if someone presents some kind of information in a certain way, then they tend to just immediately take it without thought almost. And
that's, I mean, I feel like that's happening at lots of different levels, that people just
yeah,
take, this person has hundreds of thousands of followers or 1 million followers, and now like they're the go-to person to get this information from because everybody's following them. It's like, well, not
yeah,
necessarily. Like, are they credentialed? Like, do they have the background degrees? Have they actually had experience applying this in a real life setting and had real life experiences with multiple levels of athletes, male, female, D1, D2, D3, high school, pro?
yeah.
Like, that's the type of questions you got to ask. Or if they're talking about something, via the social spaces, are they referring to an actual article that's even worth anything at the same time too?
Yeah, it's become quite a problem, I would say. A lot of them are listening to the influencer with the most followers and not to credentialed professionals. Most people don't know the difference between, you know, a dietitian and a nutritionist and all this kind of stuff. So it definitely adds a layer of challenge for me. And one thing that I'll say too, just as far as like the actual space, a lot of them don't realize what a dietitian can bring to the table. Like they don't know what they don't know. And so you kind of have to sell them a little bit, be like, hey, look, these are the things I can actually provide to you. Because a lot of them, their initial thought is, let's just get a chef. They kind of want to do the NBA model, almost, where they're like, we want a chef with, you know, chef dietitian, or something like we want a classically trained chef who
Which are
is also,
unicorns. You can't find a lot of those in the world.
yeah, it's like, okay, if you're actually classically trained chef, like, I mean, that plus an actual, you know, registered dietitian, that combination, yeah, total unicorn. So a lot of esports organizations, they do take that approach and they say, well, why can't I just use a private chef? And what value does a dietitian bring in addition to a private chef? And so a lot of them, again, don't know the value there, and you have to do a lot of, you know, convincing and then a lot of free work to get your foot in the door and like really show them what they can do and what's there. And one thing that I've been able to hit on a little bit is actually there is actually starting to be more drug testing in esports, which is kind of interesting. And so I've been able to leverage that as you know, one potential in that the organization really cares about, because they don't want to have pop drug tests or missed events because they have to, yeah. Just fun little side story. I'm not going to name names of any teams or anything, but I've seen multiple times where they will announce that drug tests will happen at a particular event, and then like half the teams that were going to compete drop out. And you're like, that's interesting. It's very suspicious.
You don't need to say anything after that, you know?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, and it's a whole different breed of you know, stuff that people might be taking. But anyway, yeah. So it's a whole industry. It's a whole weird thing.
Yeah, I try to sell it to them now and try to make it familiar, right? Like business, investment, like, hey, here's the big three: sleep, hydration, and fueling. This makes up 40 to 60% of your day. And then
Yeah.
just then ask them questions and let them talk, right? Like, hey, when you only get 4 hours of sleep, how do you feel? Hey, when you don't hydrate during the day, how do you feel? Hey, when you don't eat anything for 5 hours, how does that affect you when you're gaming? And let them
Yeah.
answer their own questions. And then at the end of the day, like, once they then say the information to you, then you're just regurgitating that back to them. Like, well, I heard you say this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
So that tells me that what I do essentially does help you. Would you agree or not agree? And at the end of the day, if they said it, I mean, you're using their own words, you know,
Yeah.
alongside them, and then it's like, well, you can't really disagree because
You said
all
it.
the things you just provided me says it has a direct effect on what you do. So you might want to just give me a chance. You know, I always say you've done whatever you've done for the last, who knows, 14 to 20 years of your life. Just give me a week or give me
Yeah.
a month. And if I'm here bullshitting you and I don't know what I'm talking about and you don't get better, cool. You can find somebody different. But if you get one or two benefits the next couple of weeks, let's try to have some more conversations on how we can continue to keep building those building blocks on top of each other to get you to a higher level performance that you want to be at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say I've had a lot of success with these teams, because I do the same approach where it's like, okay, let's see what they actually value, right? And the biggest things that I see in esports is low energy. That's what most of them complain of. They say I have low energy, or they might say like maybe some mental fogginess, or that's probably the biggest one. And then sometimes eye strain. That's another one that I hear a lot of. But I really do like to do those little tests where I say, hey, what do you think? What do you actually think is causing this? And a lot of them will say, oh, I don't drink enough water. You know, I've had some esports athletes where they literally straight up, like, no bullshit, they do not drink water. They only drink fluids of other varieties. And so usually it's like a soda, an energy drink, some kind of powdered mixture, that kind of, like, it's literally 0% of their diet is just straight water.
And they're
So
probably just so locked into the game and you're just going from game to game to game to game. I'm sure there's probably
yeah,
challenges like it's like if it's not in their environment or right next to them, they're probably not going to do it. Or if
yeah.
they don't have time to go and grab something real quick, or someone's not physically bringing them something, they're probably not going to have the time to do it because they have to continue to keep locked in on whatever space they're in.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a lot of success with that where I'll come in and I'll do a little bit of, because they have these compounds normally where they go and they practice and they train. And it's just their facility. And I'll do some environmental design where it's like, okay, let's get a mini fridge with some water in the actual room, right? We need you to be constantly drinking water. Coaches are going to encourage you to sip on it between games, that kind of thing. And a lot of times what I'll do is if they do have a private chef, I'll coordinate with them, make sure that it's very mind-focused food options. If they are players ordering DoorDash or whatever, then I'll go through, I'll be like, here's your favorite restaurants, here's choice 1, 2, 3 that I want you to pick from there. But I'll definitely do a lot of pre-post testing. I'll be like, okay, give me 1 week, let's rate your energy levels before and after, and we'll see where you're at. And if it didn't work for you, I'll shut up. But if it did work for you, give me a shot. So I love doing that kind of systematic assessment and testing. And for me, that helps too, because when you can show your worth to the coaches and the higher ups, that goes a long way versus just saying, oh yeah, nutrition can help with your energy versus like, oh, everybody improved by 2 points on a 1 to 10 scale with their energy levels after working with me, So that kind of stuff goes a long way for sure.
Especially nowadays, like the more that us as dietitians get involved in the sports science space and be able
Oh
to
yeah.
collect meaningful data and then be able to provide that real-time information to whatever level that may be, coach, athlete, parent, maybe it's, the owner or the CFO, whoever that is, right? Like the more value we can bring to the table and show like, I mean, you may want to get rid of me, but let's be honest, like we had a 30% increase in performance, or,
Yeah.
we were able to increase lean body mass by 6 pounds across the whole entire team in 6 months. Like those type of things speak volume at the end of the day and show that like, well, we need this person because yes, it's a team and everyone definitely is working together to put the best possible product out in the space that they're in. But each of those people are having a piece of the pie to be able to get the athlete where it be. It's never going to be just one single person. And if we can get into that data collection space, especially with athlete management systems, or, I've also talked to several dietitians and they're starting to hire their own sports science and data analytics team, which
Yeah.
is advantageous because now you can keep that all in house. You don't have to pay for a third party service.
Yep.
Kind of sky's the limit of what we can do there.
Yeah. Yeah. We're starting, we just recently in the last like year and a half at 1HP, we started a very, very rigorous data collection initiative. And so this last year has just been every single thing, every little data point that we can get our hands on, we've been collecting it and we've been storing it. And so our intention is after we have a couple of years of this data, like we're going to go back and almost everybody on 1HP is like a published scientific author, and we're going to have access to this massive esports database that pretty much no one else has even heard of. Like we're going to be the only ones with it. And we're hoping to be able to leverage that to show, okay, like players who slept this much performed this much better, they got the championship. Players who drank water, win, loss, whatever, like all these different things. And we're going to try to, go through that and see what are the causal factors potentially that could be, biggest bang for buck for teams to implement. But yeah, so stay tuned for that.
You're going to basically become the UFC Performance Institute of esports, what you're telling me, because have you seen that they put out like a volume every year, every couple of years?
Yeah. Clint is the GOAT. I love Clint, and he's a very good friend of mine actually. And Charles is probably my best dietitian friend that I have. Every time I'm in Vegas, I go hang out with him. So yeah, I love the UFC PI. Like that place is amazing, and yeah, I've been to some of their conferences, and yeah, it's fun. It's a blast, and I love what they're doing. They're really taking nutrition to the true next level. Like if you want to see where it can go, like just look at the UFC.
Yeah, it's like we're not just smoothies and handing out to go boxes after the game. Like
yeah,
we're doing, and again, those are important parts. Like I don't have anyone take that out of context. Like food service is critical because if we don't have the food service, we can't feed the players or the coaches, whoever that is.
Yeah, they still do that though. They do that there too, though.
yes. But when you can actually really dive into the nitty gritty and really show like what we can do on a very high level and how much of an impact that doesn't only make for your organization, but now makes for other dietitians outside of the organization by collecting information and showing and looking at these trends, like that's a game changer.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really excited to see what the next like 5-10 years holds for this space, honestly.
So we are getting close to time. I think we need to have a part 2. There's definitely a couple other huge topics I want to really get into, especially the nitty gritty of how you implement your fueling strategies and like possibly giving us a real life example, and
Oh yeah.
definitely really diving into the supplementation, the neurobiology, maybe some neurotropics, things like that.
Oh
I think
yeah.
so. That'll
That's
be
like
a
one of my favorite.
whole that'll be a whole nother episode that we need to get into.
Yeah.
Um, but whoever's listening to this, like, stay tuned because there's a lot more really cool info that's going to come at you. If you want to contact Casey, all of his contact information is going to be down in the show notes. My link tree there is there as well. So if you want to listen to past podcasts, have different food and supplement discounts, or if you need nutrition services, all that is you can be found in my link tree link. But Casey,
Yeah.
super excited. Let's
Uh,
you good to
honestly,
go for another
yeah,
one?
yeah. Honestly, like I love talking about this, and I think that yeah, we barely scratched the surface because yeah, there's like I could give you step by step protocols for nootropics, for different energy, for pregame, postgame, like all this kind of stuff, and I really geek out about that, and I've given some presentations at conferences and so on around these topics. So absolutely, totally down to be back, and it's been a blast being here. So yeah, whenever you want to chat again, like I'm down.
You heard it here. It's gonna happen. We're gonna make it happen, and y'all are gonna be excited about it because it's definitely new, something new and exciting, and it's on the cutting edge. And the fact that they work with pretty much a majority of the esports organizations definitely makes his position and the company he works for a unicorn. So stay tuned. We'll come out, you guys, with another episode, and appreciate y'all as always. Please share, like, and spread the wisdom.